And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and we are entering week 16 of the MLR 2025 seasons, the penultimate week, as one would say, the second to last week of the season. Again, everything's still on the line. Lots of things that every team, with maybe the exception of Anthem to play for, though Anthem could always be spoiler, but every other team so much to play for. Not everything will be decided technically in this week, especially home pitch advantage, which, as I mentioned in my power ranking videos, if you saw, I feel super important when it comes to the playoffs. So I feel even in the final week, you'll probably have most teams still playing as hard as possible. We have still the remnants of Storm Week in this week. So we have 6 games total. One of them is going to be on Wednesday. One team, unfortunately, has to play 2 games in the span of 4 days. So that's going to be kind of rough. May play a factor into how their playoff chances go, but we'll go into that. We'll really go into big detail on all of this. So let's get to it. So again, as you know, you can watch every game live or on demand on ESPN Plus if you're here in the United States, or internationally you can watch on the Rugby Network. Of course, if you don't want to pay for ESPN Plus, then and you're in the States, you got to wait 72 hours later to watch the replays on the Rugby Network. Otherwise, ESPN Plus, instantaneous replay pretty much right after the game. They do announce sometimes at the last minute a game or two will be on ESPN2, so be on the lookout for that. But again, most all the games are on ESPN Plus. Now, we start with Friday night footy, or at least Friday afternoon if you're on the West Coast. Friday, May 30th, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, San Diego at Miami. A big game to kick off our weekend because a lot is riding on this game in particular. This will be taking place at the Baptist Health Community Field, which is at Chase Stadium, home to the Miami Sharks. Very interesting game. Again, like I said, lots riding on this one in particular. Very interesting between these two teams, because literally two teams in the last 7 games having inverse records. So the last 7 games, San Diego, who start off super hot, are 2-7. I'm sorry, 2-5. Last 7 games, Miami 5-2. So it's interesting how things have been switching. San Diego started off as one of the hottest teams, the last undefeated team in the league this season, to now being a team that's on the brink of playoff elimination. Miami, who struggled at the beginning of the season, now just 1 win away from clinching the playoff spot. So again, lots of indications. If Miami wins this game with a bonus point, they are in the playoffs. NOLA Gold are automatically eliminated. Now, if Miami wins with just a regular 4 points, and again, you can get a bonus point if you get 4 tries. If Miami just wins with 4 points, technically NOLA is still in the running for a playoff spot, but if NOLA loses, regardless if Miami wins or lose, Miami is automatically in the playoffs. So Miami, unfortunately, has to wait to see what happens to NOLA, but they can help themselves out. If they at least win, they can really help themselves out if they can get that all-important bonus point win. For San Diego, San Diego loses this game. They're technically not out of the playoffs yet. A lot of things still have to happen. If San Diego loses this game, LA wins their game or ties, which has happened before. LA has tied with Old Glory DC 2 seasons ago. And Seattle wins their game with a bonus point, then San Diego is automatically out of the playoffs. So again, if San Diego wins, they're good. They're still in it. They haven't clinched anything, but they're not out. If San Diego loses, they're technically not out yet, but if San Diego loses, LA wins, and Seattle wins with a bonus point, San Diego is officially out of the playoffs. So, of course, San Diego has to do their best to try to hold on to this win. Like I said, San Diego hasn't exactly been having that great of the last 7 games. San Diego, though, has played Miami twice already. They're up 2-0. They have not lost to Miami. The last time that these two played was earlier in the season. San Diego dominating Miami in San Diego 37-12. But again, that was back when San Diego was hot and Miami was not. Now the roles have reversed. Miami did lose a very tough game against RFCLA just last weekend, but before that, Miami did defeat New England, your reigning defending two-time MLR champions. So I'm just saying that Miami is still a very dangerous team and a team that's looking really, really good as we go into the playoffs. San Diego not so much. So I'm gonna say San Diego gets the win and possibly secures himself a playoff spot. Then, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Anthem Rugby Carolina going over to Zion Stadium to take on the Utah Warriors. Surprisingly, these two teams have only played each other once. Utah blew out Anthem last year, 44-19 in Carolina. Not much really to say about this game. Anthem, of course, has been eliminated from the playoffs. They're the only team so far that's been eliminated. They could, of course, play spoiler. Utah does still have a lot to play for because Utah, I'm going to pull up the rankings right now, the standings right now for the West. And as you see, very, very tight. Houston and Utah are technically tied, 48 points each. Houston technically has the tiebreaker right now because they have more points differential in the plus than Utah does. That means they've scored more points and have points scored against them. RFCLA right behind both teams with 45 points, and then Seattle right behind them with 42, and then San Diego 1 point behind Seattle. So it is a very, very tight Western Conference. So Utah can't really just sit on their laurels. If they want that home pitch advantage, again, that only goes to the first and second place team. So technically Utah still has to fight off Houston, RCLA, and Seattle, because technically any of those teams could finish in first or second place. So Utah isn't necessarily, I feel, going to let their foot off the gas with Anthem. They pretty much should win this game. So that being said, I think they will. And it is at home in Zion Stadium, which is a pretty loud place for Utah. So I think Utah will win and keep their home pitch chances alive. Then we move on to another important game. Saturday, May 31st, 2025, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at Segra Field, Segra in D.C., the Soccer Metroplex. Old Glory D.C. hosting RFCLA. This has been a pretty storied rivalry so far between these two teams. RFCLA is up 1 win and 1 draw between the two. The last time these two played was in LA. It was a very, very physical, brutal game. Most points that LA has scored on an opponent, 54 points to 44. So it was still very, very close. But man, both of these teams have been pretty good these last couple of games. Old Glory is on a 4-game win streak. Technically, LA is on a 4-game non-losing streak because they tied with Seattle, but then they are on a 3-game win streak with a big win over Miami just recently. And of course, Old Glory, their last win was over New England Free Jacks. So again, Old Glory looking really good, RCLA looking really tough. This is going to be a very, very hard game to call. Again, lots to play for. You saw what the Western Conference looked like. I'm going to show you what the Eastern Conference looks like. And right now, New England, as you see, is ahead at the top with just 46 points, though. They're only 2 points ahead of Chicago and Old Glory, who are tied with 44. Technically, again, Chicago has the higher point differential right now. And then Miami behind at 37 and NOLA with 31. Again, we talked about the importance of those two with winning in this next weekend's games to keep their playoff chances alive. But Old Glory, again, wants that home pitch advantage. They don't want to be either playing at New England or playing at Chicago. They'll want to be home. So, again, this game is very important for Old Glory. RFCLA, as I mentioned before, they need to keep the win. If San Diego loses, a win for LA automatically clinches them the playoffs. Technically, a tie with Old Glory automatically clinches them in the playoffs. So, why leave it up to next weekend, especially if San Diego loses? get the win, get their playoff chances. If San Diego does win, LA needs to win to keep their playoff chances alive because now they're in danger of maybe losing that. So, man, very very important game. Lots on the line. I know I'm gonna sound like a homer, but I really do feel LA has been peaking at the right time. I know Old Glory has as well, but man, you know, we've beaten Old Glory. I think we can do it again. Let's go LA. And now let's finish off the rest of the week slate in this very, very important week 16. The second game on Saturday, just 1 hour after the RFCLA Old Glory game. So unfortunately, you're going to have to go back and forth if you want to watch both games at the same time. A very, very important game again. NOLA goal going over to Geek Seek Stadium to take on the Chicago Hounds. Again, as I mentioned before, this is very important to NOLA because if NOLA loses, they are out of the playoffs. They are gone. And of course, Chicago still fighting for a chance at home pitch advantage. In this rivalry, it's very close. NOLA has 2 wins. Chicago only has 3. Again, very, very interesting how both teams have been facing. NOLA is on a 4-game losing streak, while Chicago started off really hot, 7-1. Last 6 games, they are 2-4. So a little bit shaky. Obviously, Chicago had a pretty big win against Anthem. Not the most impressive, but a win's a win, and usually that might be the get right game for them. But the interesting thing about Chicago, they unfortunately are going to be the only team that's affected by this storm week. Not only do they have to play on Saturday, but then 4 days later, they gotta play on Wednesday to Houston. Now, fortunately for Chicago, they are hosting both of those games, so they get to finish at home. And then their season's over. They technically get a bye before week 18 to kind of lick the wounds and heal up right before the playoffs. So, it's going to be interesting to see how they manage this. Again, Chicago can't really take off on either game because they are fighting for that home pitch advantage, especially if New England and Old Glory both win their games. Chicago has to win to stay in contention. So they kind of have to win both of these games because then fate's out of their hands because they don't do anything the last week. So, with that being said, I feel Chicago should win over NOLA. NOLA has unfortunately kind of just been gassed out for the last part of the season, so they'll probably be bounced out of the playoffs. Now, we'll go to the Wednesday game in just a second, but before that, Sunday, we have another really big game as you have a rematch of our championship game of last season. Seattle Seawolves taking on the reigning, defending, two-time New England Free Jacks. The only 2 teams who have ever won the championship twice. And this will be taking place in New England at Veterans Memorial Stadium, 11 a.m. So a early afternoon game, or right before the afternoon for Pacific West Coast fans, kind of early in the middle of the day for East Coast fans, but a huge clash nonetheless. Again, both of these teams kind of is interesting because they both started off the season not so great. As I mentioned before, Seattle just odd. 2-5 to start the season. They are now 5-1-1 in the last 7 games. They are on a 3-game winning streak. Seattle doing what Seattle does. New England also kind of the same. They started off with a 2-3 record. Then they were on a 7-game win streak. Unfortunately, though, they are now on an odd 2-game losing streak. 1 to Miami, and then just recently 2 Old Glory. Granted, Old Glory game could have gone either way. The Miami game was a little bit more lopsided. This is going to be an interesting one. I just feel the factor is going to be this. Who is going to play fly half for the Free Jacks? Because we know that Dan Hollinshead, congratulations to him, has a baby on the way. He is going to be leaving the team until the playoffs to take care of the family. So that means somebody is coming out back for fly half, whether that means Filatoni Penny or possibly Jason Patros. He was interviewed just recently. Didn't want to give up too much away, but the fact that Dan Hollinshead, granted, he's having a kid. Can't really deny him from taking care of his family, but allowing him to leave means that somebody is ready to play. So who's it going to be? That might be the X factor in this game. Again, Seattle's looking really, really good. Granted, their win against Houston was kind of an odd game, but this was a really hard one to call. This was a really, really hard one to call. I'm just gonna go with the home pitch advantage, and I'm gonna say that New England gets the win here. But man, this could go either way. Now, again, Seattle needs to win this, especially if San Diego loses, and with a bonus point, mind you, to secure themselves a playoff spot. A win, technically, San Diego could technically stay in the race if San Diego wins their very last game with a bonus point to tie with Seattle, and if Seattle loses. So if Seattle gets the win with a bonus point and San Diego loses, they've clinched the playoff. So it behooves Seattle to win with a bonus point to give themselves as many points advantages as possible. If San Diego loses, Seattle has to have that bonus point win to secure a possible playoff spot. Otherwise, it technically still goes into the last week of the season. Of course, New England sitting on top of the Eastern Conference, they're fighting for home pitch advantage, which is going to be very crucial. Now, final game of the slate, like I mentioned before, Chicago has the unenviable task of having to play 2 games in the span of 4 days. Not only after they were hosting NOLA, they now have to host the Houston SaberCats. Houston SaberCats, another team, start off 5-1. Last 8 games, they are 4-4. Just recently losing to Seattle in kind of an odd game. Houston could have won that game. It wasn't for a yellow card at the very last second. Seattle was able to pull off the victory. Otherwise, it was a very defensive game. Chicago, of course, again, Chicago, last 6 games, 2-4. Possibly they could get a win against NOLA, so they'll go 3-4. But they're definitely kind of limping in the end after a 7-1 start. They do have the luxury of hosting Houston. At first I wanted to go with Houston with this, but I feel honestly Chicago could kind of pick up some steam in this. This is the last game of the season for Chicago. They have a bye for the very last week of the season, so they could throw everything they have into this game. Again, they're fighting for. They've already clinched the playoffs. They're technically trying to fight for that first or second place finish for home pitch advantage. Possibly even to try to avoid New England, at least in the first week. That's definitely going to be a tough game to play. I'm going to say Chicago wins this one. Again, another really, really close game to call. Houston, like I mentioned before, they are tied at the top with Utah. They need to win this game just to stay at least in that first or second place, because if RFCLA wins, if Seattle wins, technically both teams, well, RFCLA could technically leapfrog over Houston if Houston loses this game and doesn't get any bonus points. Seattle will be just nipping at the heels. So, again, this game's still important for Houston. They still got to try to win this one. But I think Chicago... you know what? I'm going to change it, because it's been proven. Games in that kind of short period have just never been well, even when you don't have to travel. Yeah, it's just been Storm Week's been horrible. I really feel the teams that have had to unfortunately really fight through multiple games in a short period of time tend to suffer a lot. So I'm actually going to change this pick. Live and you see it. I'm going to go with Houston in this one. And unfortunately, Chicago ends the season with a loss, and kind of they're going to leave their playoff home pitch fates into the hands of the other teams for the last week of the season. But that's how tight this season has been. I don't think I recall a season where both Eastern and Western conferences, everything was left up to literally the last 2 weeks of the season. But that's what makes this such an exciting and fun week. So, that being said, that is our Week 16 preview. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you're in my Super Bowl Pick'em pool, make sure you get all those picks in, and every point with that also counts as well. So, as always, thank you very much for checking out my videos. I appreciate the support, and I'll see you on the pitch.